Hey everyone, it's me, Joe. Today I'm doing a little different video. As you can see, not the usual setup. I got my headset on here. What I'm looking at right now is myself and my computer screen. But now I'm looking at my camera. It's my phone. I just hooked up my phone to my computer, and that's my camera, and it's really difficult to sort of juggle between the two. But anyways, today's video, like I said, is going to be a little different. I'm going to be breaking down a video that I found on the dank, dark, dusty shelves of some subreddit. And I watched about the first minute or so of this video prior to this video a couple days ago, and it's something for sure. The best way I can explain it is Lost Cause Furry. That's really the best way I can explain it. So, let's just dive right into it. So here we have our furry himself from Furry History. My face may or may not be covering a portion of his face, but it's just a purple dog. I'm sure you can see all of it pretty much, so you're not missing much. The channel is called Furry History. Now, before going into this, I want you to know, for anyone watching this who may be considering going to this guy's channel and hating on him, please don't. It's not cool. You can go there and say disagree, but please don't start spreading hate. Let's just jump right into this.
Now, I know what you're saying, but this is about objectivity, not about supporting the Confederacy, and not about supporting slavery, neither of which I support. If there is a statement that you know spiritually is true, but factually is wrong, it has to be called out. And that's what I'm doing here. You see people all the time making fun of that old phrase, the war of northern aggression, as though northern aggression is unthinkable, as though the South wasn't on the defense for the majority of the war, and as though it was the North's institutions that were threatened, and not the South's. But it was the South's peculiar institution that was threatened, the backbone of their society and economy. Before the war, the North purposefully upset the balance of slave and free states. For those of you who don't know, in the USA we have 2 senators per state, and that is the second chamber of Congress. So when they are adding states, for the most part, they knew to add a free state and a slave state to keep the balance, so that neither side would be able to one-up the other.
Okay, so first issue I have to address with this. He says when they added a new state, they would be sure to add both free and slave state to keep the balance. That's not true in the slightest. When a state was added, it was just added on its own. The only reason this sort of happened was in the Missouri Compromise of 1819, is what I assume he's trying to get at here, is when Missouri wanted to become a state. Both sort of ends of the spectrum of free staters, free soilers, as they were called, and pro-slavery state supporters, I guess you would call them, or rather just pro-slavery forces in the government, were both sort of vying for Missouri to be entered as either a free state or a slave state. So therefore, the issue came up. But there was someone to come in and save the day. This was Henry Clay. Henry Clay proposed the idea that Missouri could be entered the Union as a slave state, but he drew a parallel on the map and said anything above this point except Missouri, for that single exception, anything above that parallel to be entered into the Union later on will be a free state. Anything below that parallel will be entered as a slave state. On the addendum that also Maine would be created as as a free state. So there's this balance being struck, and the sort of battle line, if you will, of the Civil War is being drawn. It's not just the Mason-Dixon, it's now this parallel that divides free and slave states. And there's still creating a balance here with Missouri and Maine. That was just this one compromise. It didn't happen all that often. Like if you look at the creation of Alabama and institution of it as a state into the United States, it's not really brought up as a problem. It's so far and deep into the South that, okay, that's, it's bound to be a slave state, whatever. But Missouri presented the issue because it's straddling North and South, essentially, even though it really is in the North. But of course, this compromise sort of settled that issue. So I wouldn't go and say every time they added a state, they made sure to keep the balance, when it was really just to my knowledge, this one situation. All right, let's keep going.
However, in 1859, Oregon was admitted as a free state, and in 1861, Kansas was admitted as a free state, which is 19 free states
Hold on.
and 50 was admitted as a free state, and in 1861, Kansas was admitted as a free state, which is 19 free states and 15 slave states in 1861. And in 1860, an abolitionist president against the admission of more slave states to the Union was elected. It is under that atmosphere that states seceded. And as
Okay, so just a quick thing to address with the Kansas being admitted as a free state. It eventually was admitted as a free state, like he says, in 1861. But it wasn't without its issues. I mean, if you look at, of course, Bleeding Kansas, there was the vote passed with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which sort of instituted popular sovereignty, the idea that those living in a territory would be able to go out and vote on whether their territory would be admitted as a free or slave state. With Kansas, however, of the 5,000 or so votes that were cast, only about 2,000 of them were actual voters from Kansas. The rest of them were pro-slave voters coming in from like Missouri and other nearby states. So it's not like this isn't an issue. You know, pro-slavers are causing a ruckus across the South, essentially, when it comes to admitting, slave states. So it's not like this was unjustly or unfairly put into place. Kansas existed as a slave territory for quite a while, and that's why Bleeding Kansas was a thing. That's why John Brown went out there and was fighting for free soiler ideologies, basically. So he's omitting a lot of important facts, mostly because I think this might not be researched well enough, or, well, he says he doesn't support the Confederacy, so I can't say he is doing this to push a narrative. So I'm just going to write it off as if this isn't researched well enough. And I'm not saying like I'm the authority on this kind of thing, but I think just omitting these facts, or at least not bringing them up or failing to bring them up, just is kind of inappropriate if you're going to make a video trying to say the Civil War was the War of Northern Aggression. If you're making that bold of a claim, you're going to need some extraordinary facts to back that up.
As each new Western free state was added, the slave states had less and less of a voice in the decision-making of the United States, and they knew this, which is why nearly all of them seceded. What is this behavior before the war, if not aggression? You hear so much that the South fired the first shots of the war. That's why the idea of a war of northern aggression is laughable. Before you say that, ask yourself, what were federal soldiers doing in Fort Sumter? The purpose was to facilitate a northern invasion of the South. If Lincoln...
That's not true. Okay, so the reason Union troops were at Fort Sumter, at least the idea that I understand, is that the South was taking very aggressive actions across the southern states, taking armories and other federal positions across the South by force long before Fort Sumter. So in like the winter of 1861, I guess, following the secessions. And, they're taking over federal forts. Fort Sumter is the last federal fort in deep southern territory. So the United States is, of course, going to hold on to that. And they're not like they're just not going to give it up. There were troops there to begin with in the first place. This is, to them, their land. They don't recognize the South as a sovereign nation. He's sort of treading into the realm of saying the United States already recognizes the Confederates as a sovereign nation, and they're using Fort Sumter as a means to invade the South. That's not true at all. They already owned it. They didn't see the South as a nation at all. They saw it as the United States that they had to get back, essentially. And they're not just going to abandon an expensive federal fort. I can't... That makes no sense. Like, oh, the South succeeded. Guess we gotta go. We're packing up and leaving. This is theirs. It doesn't make any sense. But let's continue.
Was not planning on invading the South, then why did he have the federal troops continue manning Fort Sumter? It's not as though it would help them in a war against anyone other than the South. If they simply
I'm just let you let that sink in for a second. That's among one of the stupidest things I think I've ever heard in an argument on the Civil War. I mean, already ignoring the fact that the South was being aggressive and taking aggressive actions against the North months before Sumter, and then just assuming that, oh, the only reason troops are there is because they're going to invade the South. Not true at all. And the fort was there for a long time. Fort Sumter was not this, it didn't just spring up overnight in 1861 to, act as a launching point for the invasion of the South. There's only 80 guys at Fort Sumter. It's not like they're going to bring thousands and thousands of troops in, put them into Fort Sumter, and invade the South in the first place. I mean, the troops there were kind of just shuffled in at the last minute by their commander. There's a few forts around that area that they were kind of bouncing in between, and they ended up in probably the worst locations. They were surrounded by Confederate batteries, but, I mean, this is just a stupid argument to make.
abandoned federal military installations in the South, there would not have been a war. And yes, the North squatting on Southern territory was aggression.
Saying the North squatting on Southern territory is aggression, again, this is going on the idea that the Union views the Confederacy as its own sovereign nation, when in fact they just viewed it as an uprising. It was all it was. They're not saying we're gonna, hold this nation's land and make it ours. They already owned it in their eyes, so it's just an extension of their own country. I don't know how to say it nicely, but this is a really stupid argument, and it's not very well researched or put together.
You should think of it this way. If an Iraqi militia attacks a U.S. base in Iraq, is it an attack of Iraqi aggression? No, it isn't. The Confederates only wanted to be independent. The USA were the attackers. And now I know you'll ask, but what about when Lee invaded the North?
Okay, besides that point, that's a really stupid point. You can't just let a significant chunk of your country secede. Who wants to be the president that loses, 15 states to uprising because they don't like your government? It's not just like they were going to secede and be like, well, that happened. All right, back to usual business. They can't just do that, especially since the South provides so much economic support for the country as a whole. I mean, by 1860, 60%, 50% of the U.S. exports or something like that is, cotton from the South. They're not just going to let that go. I don't see any logical reason why they would just let the South secede. So, again, this is a really stupid point, and it's a very stupid argument. I don't know how else to put it. It's not put together well. It's not well enough thought out. It's like this guy was just sitting in his office at 3 a.m. and was like, whoa, the South they just wanted to be free. The North was really the aggressors. This is just a bunch of lost cause bullshit, if anything. But we're going to watch this video out to the end. He's going to talk about Lee invading the North, and he's probably going to say something like, this was just a retaliatory measure taken by the South to get back at their attackers, to get back at the aggressors. But we'll see. I could be really wrong.
The purpose of that was not conquering the North. It is entirely a different thing. Lee invaded the North to try to end the war, not to conquer anything. Meanwhile, Northern invasions were specifically to conquer the whole of the South and to end their independence.
Again, coming from a standpoint where this guy thinks the North recognizes the South as a sovereign nation. That's not the case at all. They never recognized them as a country once, only other than the fact that I believe was the contraband, they could go in and take slaves and free them and liberate them. as contraband of another country, something to that effect. But to make this argument is silly. The United States is, in their eyes, conquering land that's already theirs. They're just getting back stolen land, essentially, getting back land that is being under the control of a fake government, essentially.
The secession of these states was, by the way, legal. There was nothing prohibiting the southern states from seceding in the Constitution.
This is another lost cause point that's brought up a lot. It's like, well, nowhere in the Constitution does it say it's illegal to secede from the United States. And I don't really think it is, but it's still kind of like a gray area. Like, you can't expect to just create a country and get away with it, especially on this size and scale. I don't see why that argument is ever made. Like, why wouldn't someone want to take back that massive amount of land lost?
Not to mention that such a northern invasion was against the spirit of America. It is against the idea of popular sovereignty and self-government. It is against what this nation was founded on, which was a war of independence against Britain. To deny the southern states their right to self-rule is disgraceful.
That's really stupid. Right off the bat, really, really stupid. I don't think I have to make the argument again. Just because you seceded doesn't mean you're legitimate. No one really recognized the Confederacy as an actual nation other than maybe France and England, and that was shaky at best. Especially, the Union didn't attack the South unprovoked. Like I said, the South had been taking aggressive measures and taking over federal installments across the South before Sumter, and then they fired on the Union. That's a declaration of war, if anything. So why wouldn't they fight back? They're just going to let some random army, some illegitimate nation, fire on their fort and be okay with it? I don't understand the logic here. And Furry History, I would like to see a response to any of this. See if you can best me, because these arguments aren't well-founded at all, I think, in my opinion at least. Being somewhat professionally trained as a historian and still, of course, being trained as a student, this is not very persuasive. It lacks any evidence. It lacks logic, mostly, is what it lacks. But I give you a chance, and I'm gonna give you the rest of the video because there's not much left. But let's see.
But this is besides the point. The point is, the North wanted to end the South's independence. The South wanted both the South and the North to be independent. The South did not want to conquer the North. The North wanted to conquer the South, and it did so, which shows more than anything else that it was a war of northern aggression.
No, that was a really stupid argument at the end even. He's like, the South, it doesn't want to conquer the North. Not only does it not want to do it, but doesn't have the means to just take over parts of the country that it doesn't have any claim to, let alone its own part of the country, what it has no legitimate claim to. Again, just seceding doesn't, ensure that you're an independent, sovereign nation. Alright, to conclude, that was a really stupid video. It lacked sufficient evidence, lacked all logic, as I mentioned. I don't think I have much else to say, other than if you believe that, then you're completely wrong, in about every sense of wrong you can get. And this is not coming from someone who's like, well, I learned this in school, so it must be right. No, I've been researching the Civil War for, 15 years now? Of course, albeit 5 of it was through very tiny books, and the past 10 have been through actual academic studies of the Civil War. This big old section there, mostly, and beyond. But, don't take my word for it, or countless other historians, or the actual historical record. No, trust a guy who's a furry historian on YouTube. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't know. Again, please don't spread hate to this guy's channel. I think I've said as much as I can possibly say about it. So, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you liked the video. If you like it, I'll do more. I just sort of doing these breakdown videos. I think it's a good time, and I like putting some of my knowledge to use. So thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe if you will, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace.